Hello, my awesome scientists. So tonight we're going to learn a little bit more about light. Okay, so today in class we started talking about light and how different materials allow light to act in different ways. And the first thing we need to remember is that light's going to travel in a straight line until it hits something. Okay, and when light hits something, depending on what that material is or that medium that it's passing through, and remember a medium is just something that light passes through, like it could be water or air. It's just a medium is what is the light going through. And it's going to act in different ways depending on that medium. So tonight we're going to look at a couple of those things. So you need to make sure you are on page 54 in your journal, and you will have this entire page filled out by the end of the night. You also need to make sure that you will be able to show me the motions tomorrow. So we're going to learn 4 motions to go with our 4 new vocabulary words. So make sure you are ready to show me them tomorrow. Okay, so light can be one of 4 things. Light can be transmitted, absorbed, reflected, or refracted. And again, it just depends on the material or the object it is trying to pass through. So the first thing we're going to talk about is transmit. Okay, and you need to remember in English we can use the present tense, the past tense. So you might hear it say light can be transmitted, light will transmit. Just be familiar with the different versions of each of these words. But when light is transmitted, light passes through an object. That's it. Okay, just like a glass window. When you look outside your window, that light passes through. Okay, it stays in its straight line. It just goes through. Okay, kind of like Izzy's terrarium. Okay, we're able to see Izzy inside of it because the terrarium is made of glass, and the light passes through that glass. So when we talk about light and the direction it's traveling and what it does, we're going to hold up one hand to represent the material or the medium that light is passing through. So in this example, this would be the glass in Izzy's terrarium. This would be the pathway of the light. So the light passes through, hits the glass, and goes through in a straight line. That is why we are able to see inside Izzy's terrarium. So when we talk about the word transmit, we simply talk about how light goes through in a straight line. It's just passing through it. Okay, and so an example would be a glass window. Okay, all glass windows allow us to see through them, and so the light is simply passing through, staying in its straight line. When we diagram light, this is what it'll look like. You'll see arrows, and you'll usually see a rectangle. That rectangle is just like this. It is representing what the light is hitting or what the light is passing through. The arrows represent the direction of the light. So here you can see when light is transmitted, such as through a glass window, it just goes straight through and stays in its straight line. Okay? Our next word is absorb. Okay? Absorb is when something gets taken in. Okay, so if light is absorbed, it goes into the material and that's it. Okay, it doesn't pass through. It simply hits the object or the material and goes into it. Okay, think about when you wear dark colors, like a black shirt on a hot summer day. Okay, that light energy from the sun is hitting your clothes and it's being taken in. And that's why, especially when you wear black, you get really, really, really hot because it's taking in that light. Okay, so absorb is when light simply hits it and stays. Okay, kind of like if I have this cardboard and I have my light source, that light, it hits the cardboard. Is it going through? No. It simply is being taken in or absorbed by the cardboard. So the pathway of the light is from the flashlight straight into the cardboard, just like the diagrams show. Okay, so far we have talked about transmit, where it goes through in a straight line. We have now just talked about absorb, where it hits the object and is taken in. Okay, it does not pass through when it is absorbed. Our next word is reflect. This is one that we are really, really familiar with, okay? It's just like looking in the mirror. When you look in the mirror, you see your what? Your reflection, okay? Reflection is when light hits a surface and bounces back, okay? Remember, this is our surface. This is the pathway of light. When it is being reflected, it hits that surface and bounces back. Notice, does it go through? No. Okay, the key word in reflect is bounces back. So you want to highlight that, circle that. You want to make sure when you think of the word reflect, you think of bouncing back. okay? And that's going to be our motion whenever we talk about reflection, okay? And just like this, when I have a mirror, I can see my reflection, okay? The light hits it, and then it bounces back. You can't really see it very well, but when light hits that mirror, it's going to bounce back. That's why you're able to see yourself when you look in a mirror, okay? So examples would be mirrors. That's the most obvious example. But there are other objects that allow us to see our reflection. They're usually smooth surfaces, still surfaces, and sometimes a lot of shiny surfaces. Like a still lake. Have you ever looked at yourself in a still lake? Okay, you can usually see your reflection. Now, they're not always the clearest reflections, but what you need to make sure you understand is that if you can see it even just a little bit, then there is some light being reflected. Okay, it may not be like when we see ourselves in a mirror, but go find a spoon in your kitchen. Look in that spoon. Okay, what do you see? Okay, look in if your parents have a piece of aluminum foil, smooth that foil out. Look inside that aluminum foil. You're going to see a little bit of your reflection. Okay, so remember reflection, light hits the surface and bounces back. And our last one is refract or refraction. You need to be careful. Reflect and refract, they're very, very similar, aren't they? Okay, but in refraction, something very different happens to the light. In refraction, the light hits a surface or an object, passes through, and then bends. Okay, so refraction, light passes through an object and bends. It causes a change in the appearance of that object. Okay, when things that refract light are going to usually be transparent, they're going to be things like lenses, glasses, magnifying glasses, something that the light can transmit and pass through, but it's not traveling in a straight line anymore. Once it passes through the object, it causes it to bend. Okay, and the key word in refract is going to be bends. Okay, so I've had a couple of different objects. Okay, when you look through a magnifying glass, what happens to the stuff on the other side? Okay, it makes it bigger, right? It changed its appearance. Okay, same thing with any of this prism, with these lenses. When you look through it and you look at the object on the other side, it changes how it looks, like a telescope, a microscope. Those are all, the key thing that they all have is they all have a lens, right? Even glasses. Okay, a lot of you wear glasses. They have a lens. It makes you see things differently, doesn't it? When light is being refracted, it's going to change the pathway of the light as it passes through the object. It's going to bend that light and change how you see it. Okay, it makes the appearance different. Okay, so refract, passes through, and bends. Okay, so that is it for tonight. If you want to stay tuned, I'll quickly review what we just talked about so you can stay tuned and hear a little bit more. Try to help it sink in a little bit better and learn those motions. But if not, you are free to go and do whatever you would need to do. But our 4 new words, okay, they are transmit, absorb, reflection, and refraction. Okay, and they can get kind of tricky, so you want to make sure you memorize them and think about those examples we talk about and the properties that those materials do have. Okay, so when we talk about transmit, okay, it's got to be something that's transparent, something that's going to let that light go through and stay in a straight line. Meaning when it goes on the other side of that surface, it doesn't really change how it looks. You just see it as it is, like Izzy's terrarium or the glass window in our classroom. The light simply passes through, you can see what's on the other side, and it looks totally normal. On the other hand, we talked about absorbed, and absorbed is when it hits that surface, hits that object, and it's taken in. Okay, it doesn't change how it looks, it doesn't pass through it, it is simply taken in by that object, such as that cardboard, your clothing, it's just taking the light in. And then we had reflection. Okay, reflection is just anywhere you can see yourself, basically, because the light hits the surface and then bounces back. One thing you need to know is it depends on the angle. It doesn't always hit the surface and come straight back like in a mirror. If you'll test this tomorrow in class, but if you hold it here as opposed to here, it's going to change the way it bounces off. So reflection always depends on the angle at which the light hits the surface. But a lot of people, they only think about a mirror and forget about things like a lake Like, have you ever been to the lake and you can even see, like, the trees look like they're in the lake? You can see the reflection of the trees in the lake, and that's because the light's coming from the sun, hitting the water, and bouncing off. So you have it even outside in nature all the time, not just in mirrors and metal spoons. But the thing we need to make sure we remember about reflection is that it hits that surface and it bounces off. And then our last word we talked about was refract. And refract, first thing it has to do is it has to pass through, but it's not like transmit. Transmit, it just keeps going in a straight line. In refraction, when it passes through, it's going through a new medium and it's going to bend. Okay, so the light passes through, and then after it passes through that material, it's going to bend. Okay, so you have to have objects that are clear and transparent, just like you did for transmission. However, you have to be careful with transmit and refract, because transmit, it just goes in a straight line, but with refraction, it goes through and it bends it, changing its appearance. Okay, remember when you had Izzy's terrarium, you still had glass, you still had clear, it was still transparent, but it just went through in a straight line, and you could see Izzy totally the same as if you would if he wasn't, or she wasn't in there. Okay, but what if I have something that refracts, like this magnifying glass? If you can actually see it on the screen, I think it's making the little bit of the poster look different, isn't it? Okay, so it's not just passing through. When it passes through this material, it bends, and when it bends, the light changes direction, changing how the object looks, or whatever you're looking at looks. Like this poster, those lines are looking a lot bigger now because of this lens. Okay, so things that refract typically have lenses, and again, they're going to change the appearance of that object. Okay, so let's review our 4 words. So transmit, it goes through in a straight line. Absorb, hits the object, is taken in. Reflect, hits the surface, bounces off. And refraction, passes through a surface and bends. Okay, so we will see all those words in action tomorrow. Thank you for staying tuned a little bit longer, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful night.